Okay, this is the second video on the generator shed project that I had going on. And after I shot the first video, I had a few days or a couple of weeks to play around with this thing to fine tweak it or fine tune it because of some issues I ran across. Namely, the generator itself produces a lot of noise. It's a Champion generator and they're inherently loud. I was a little disappointed that the overall shed itself really didn't do anything to knock the noise level down. And of course, adding in the ventilation, is going to allow sound to leak out through there. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. You got to have airflow going through there to cool that thing down. So when I discovered that the noise issue was going to be a problem, I went ahead and added in secondary power stations to the main shed behind it, which is far more friendlier to noise. I mean, I can close it up, ventilate the exhaust through the back, and you can barely hear the generator at all. So in those type of situations where I got to use the generator at night and I don't want my neighbors to hear it, I will be putting it in the main shed behind the cheapo shed right there. So I added in the RV plug outlets and the 40 amp breaker down below for the larger generator. But let's go over some of the tweaking I had to do with this temporary generator shed here, and I'll go over that right now. Okay, the first issue I had was the ventilation. Originally I only had that front vent in there and then the fan unit on the opposite side to draw through. Although it did draw in a pretty good amount of airflow through there, it just didn't seem like it was enough. It seemed like the shed was overheating. So I added in this secondary vent in the doorway here, and it helps out even more to run across the generator. Okay, the other issues I had was sound. The sound that was pouring out of this thing was pretty much, I mean, I had a good 3/4 inch insulation all the way around. I didn't have any in the top there, but I do now. So basically what I've got here is about 1.25 inch rubber foam. That's right, rubber. I've got it all the way around on the doors to where it overlaps when it's closed. There's the secondary vent, and there's the attic vent there. So the way I had this set up originally was I had a dryer vent leading out the back of the shed there, and that did not work at all. It was back filling this unit up with fumes. It wasn't discharging properly, and I just didn't like the way that whole setup was. So I went ahead and got galvanized threaded pipe. I've got 1.5 inch coupling coming from the heat shield there. I had to take the heat shield off, and in order to do that I had to remove the gas tank and the fuel lines to get them out of the way, then remove that, and then hook all that up, put the heat shield back on, and then get the gas tank back on. With the heat shield off, I was able to add the coupling that fits inside here, drilled it out, bolted it on, got it in, put the heat shield back on, and then put the fuel tank back on. Then I had to run 1.5 inch pipe to 1.5 inch elbow, 90-degree elbow, and then put a coupling on here, a reducer coupling, and I switched it from 1.5 inch to 1.25 inch, and then put 1.25 inch reducer down to 1 inch female to male fitting. So I ran a 1 inch pipe out to the back, and that works best. I don't get any backflow back into the shed. I get the heat out of here, which it was backing up before when I had dryer vent on. So I've got the 40-pound propane tank that I'm feeding off of, which incidentally, the propane is just in emergency situations where I cannot get a hold of any gasoline, because this unit runs better off of gasoline than it does the propane. When it runs off propane, I notice it spits a lot of fluid out through the exhaust. Now, I don't know if it was because they didn't purged the tank properly when they filled it up, which is highly likely because they didn't seem to know what they were doing when they originally filled that tank up. But we'll see as time goes on. And one last thing I added in today is the ground wire that goes 3 feet into the ground, and this is just in case. Now I have this whole system wired into the electrical box inside the house, but being in the lightning capital of Florida, I don't want to take any chances. So this unit requires grounding when it runs outside, so I put that grounding wire in along with the grounding that I did when I hooked up the breaker box. So I've got added insurance. And then the attic fan, what I did was I removed the thermostat and I put in a fan speed control. So on really warm days I can run it at full blast, or I can control it to where the fan is moving at a slower pace and not drawing as much power. Because this fan unit is drawing 2.8 amps. It's a little bit more than I wanted it to draw, because you really want to use as much power as you can into the house. So really hot days, assuming that it's not raining, this will be out in the yard anyway, and then I'll just disconnect. That's all hand threaded in there, so it'll be easy to disconnect, take it out in the yard, and run it that way without any fan. In bad weather situations, I'll have to put it back in the shed, run the fan, and just be careful of how many amps I'm pulling out of the house. I've got everything listed, the refrigerator and all the big stuff, the amps, I've got it all listed and written down and put on the back of the and finally, I had to open up those back grills so they weren't angled down quite as much to give a little bit better airflow. The exhaust pipe is just set up at this point right now. I have an elbow for it that I haven't put on yet. Concrete backer board to control the heat, and then I've got the pass-through system where it's loose fit in there, and then it's going to have a rubber seal in there because this pipe cannot be rigid. It's got to be able to shake, rattle, and roll with the generator as it's vibrating. So I'll put a rubber seal in there. If the heat destroys it, no big deal, you know. So the only thing left to do is to go ahead, fire it up, and close it up, and give you a general idea of what the sound is going to be like. Keep in mind, this is only a 3,800 watt Champion generator, and this thing produces a hell of a lot of racket. So here we go. I'm currently about 40 feet away from the generator shed, fully enclosed. You be the judge of the sound. Okay, this pretty much wraps up this video. If I run across any other improvements that I can make on this thing to quiet it down a little bit more, I'll go ahead and post them on a later video. Until next time, take care. See ya.
When I watch Greg's workshop, I'm fully satisfied every time.